Okay, one note by Wednesday of next week, I'd like you to have your clickers. So most of you already do, but those of you who don't, get one, steal one, borrow one. Now a quick quiz. Now the correct answer to this question is not because I'm cruel. It might be true, but that's not the answer that I'm looking for. Basically, what's the biological significance of them? I made extra. Welcome. Maybe after we talk about syllabus and stuff. Okay. Not today. Also, the past lectures are on YouTube, so watch them, and also the slides are on the Blackboard. Okay. You'll need your name. the answers?
Well, the rotifers lost the ability to reproduce sexually and now reproduce asexually, which is strange.
Right. And it's strange because they've been doing it for so long. So we'll talk about why have sex later in the semester. Basically, when you have sex, you recombine genes. The asexual thing just sort of clones through time. If you're a clone, other things can adapt to you. Sorry, it takes me out easily. The asexual reproduction, the sexual reproduction allows you to vary more and adapt better. Yeah.
The other cool thing about rotifers is that they go through a dormancy through dehydration, but then when they recover, they incorporate foreign DNA to help fix their cell membranes.
Awesome. That's good. And actually, their desiccation things, one thought like to be help in like how they could be asexual because they can desiccate and then blow to a new pond. So if you have a little pond that has everything started to adapt to that clone of rotifers, well, when it dries up, they can go somewhere new, and they have then naive parasites that don't know how to deal with them. And how about archaea? Archaea?
They weren't discovered to be like genetically unique as a domain until just very recently, but Carl was.
Yep.
And they're like very ancient, and it's thought that perhaps eukaryotes like developed from archaea.
Good, perfect. Yeah, great. You're learning. All right. So we've been talking about history of life and all that sort of thing, right? What we should be asking ourselves as skeptical people is, well, that's a very nice story. How do you know it's true? Right? And a lot of things in science, we think are true, and then you go back and prove them up, and make a new discovery, right? Which is good. It's how science advances. So the story we have so far, why do we think it's true, right? So what evidence is there? What I want you to do is try getting evidence yourselves. So break it into groups of 3 or so, and then look at these sort of fossils, right? They're not stone yet, but they're on their way. What do they tell you? So what species live where these came from, right? Not just the plants either. I mean, obviously there are some plants there, producing plant fossils. What else lives there? How can you tell? Okay. What's the climate like there? Other sort of things like that. Okay. So, and also, I mean, these are from outside, so wash your hands before eating and stuff. Don't want you guys to get sick. So, go to. By fossil they meant the plants, not the other fossils. The other fossils are just cool to show you what fossils are. What I want you to do is mix those with the plants.
Okay, so green stuff, dead stuff, and one very confused spider.
We have spiders in there as well.
Something bigger.
I assume you told these from outside. I don't know. I'm having a hard time getting that stuff.
Yeah, and what someone would say, I just know they're out in the desert. What should we say?
Probably about yeah, it's hot for no reason right now. It gets close to the hall. What else can you think?
So this species also works.
You can include that, yeah.
Yeah, there's a spider too. Nope, it's still alive.
Aphids. There's some trees, but the majority of those aphids actually use that.
Let's
Climate is a deciduous forest. It's a middle of an urban zone. Herbivorous.
see. Let's say the term.
So they're all pretty small. So something is probably.
Foliage. Probably had effects from traffic.
Maybe you can kind of.
All right, so let's come together. So what do we know? And again, what I'd like you to do is, if someone says something you don't believe, attack. No, and then they go to the evidence and show. That's how science works, right? You publish a paper, and someone says, no, that's not the way it is, and they go and get new evidence and present it. So it's good. So, what do we think we know?
We think we have a good idea of the climate.
Okay.
It's probably like Tennessee-ish.
Okay.
Like stupidly hot right now.
How do you know it's hot right now when the fossils were fossilized?
Oh, they're fossilized?
Well,
I think our spider's going to disagree with that.
Or, I mean, is there evidence that it's hot right now?
There's something restricting
Yeah,
the growth of becoming like gigantic.
well, there is the plants are green, so there's sunlight. Well, there's I guess these kind of plants need heat.
Okay. So it's not winter wherever it is right now.
With the presence
It's
of
not
light,
nice.
Okay.
you could tell by what season.
Okay.
Because when they flower and stuff.
So we see reproductive structures. That tells us something about what part of the year it's in. Good. What else?
Some of these leaves aren't very waxy, so we know that there's a water is readily available. They're not trying to hold that in.
Okay. Anyone disagree with that? Okay. Yeah.
It's probably carbon dioxide and oxygen in the air.
What makes you think that?
Because the plants are growing and then photosynthesis needs carbon dioxide.
Okay. That's good.
It could be a relatively young ecosystem because there seems like there'd be a great availability of like phosphorus and nitrogen in the soil due to like the abundance and diversity.
What do you mean young?
Just like ecological time, like like as they get older, then like the phosphorus becomes fixated in the soil,
Mhm.
and it's not as available to plants, and it causes the diversity to decrease.
Okay. So. Other ideas?
What about the prevalence of grasses? That would also be a young environment. Mostly grasses.
Yeah, I mean, like recently burned over or something like that. Okay. We'll think about that. Okay. Yeah.
I would like to disagree with both of them.
Good.
Okay.
I don't think they're wrong, but
I don't think that you can really extrapolate all that from what we've got here. I mean, you've got something that looks like a grassy plant, but from that you've gotten that it is a young ecological ecosystem, time-wise. And
so are there counterexamples of older ecosystems that have grasses in them? And if so, that would be evidence that you can't that you're making too big an assumption, right? Too big an inference. I don't know enough ecology to say. I presume so. But yeah, but do you know?
I mean, like places like the tropics are older ecologically because they have like more availability of water, so you can kind of compare like the dominant species you'd find there with something in here to kind of see the age.
And age in this context means what?
Oh yeah, it's relative. It's not like empirical age. It's just like how fast like the processes like go, like they function, how fast things like regenerate and that kind of thing.
So fast turnover of
Mhm.
forest fire burnings, or is it like lack of glaciers?
Oh, I mean forest fires and like restart an ecosystem for sure. So that would be one way.
So what you can do is say, I mean, so a lot of science is statistical, right? So you can say like, yes, certainly, no, no. It's like, well, the likelihood of it being a recently, burned area is now increased. Now I'm, 70% sure it was burned recently. Rather than like, yes, we know, and no, we don't know. It's like in medicine, like, do you have cancer? Well, you have a blood test that shows you might have cancer. Well, you have some, growths that show you might have cancer. There's never a definitive like, yes. There's always a chance of error, of missing something, or chance of falsely saying yes, right? And so with science, a lot of times now people are just saying, okay, the chances of this being true are now increased by this evidence. And so you sort of increase your evidence, but then you can have one bad fact, which there goes your evidence. Right? Good. What else can we conclude?
You probably assume that there's bugs around because there's holes and things bitten off of the leaves. And if there's bugs around, there's probably something eating those bugs. So there's this whole hierarchy of animals that you can probably build off of that.
Cool. So we know that, so we have direct evidence of insects, right? From indirect evidence from the holes. So that's good. And then we can presume that then there are things that will eat those too. But we're less sure about that. But I mean, the feeding damage is great. Some groups of insects where we know that when they first appeared, not because of fossils of the insects, but like, oh look, that's a rolled leaf. A hispine beetle had to do that. Cool. Yeah.
We have a stick, which is indicative of a plant that has grown up off of the ground a little ways because of the structure and tree, shrub, whatever it came from. So we've got a more evolved ecosystem than when they first came around, and they were just vascular plants like mosses and ferns. A much more evolved plant.
Yeah. So evolved. I mean, moss has been evolving for as long as redwoods have. So it's going to be more evolved. I know, but I know what you're saying. It's something that comes up often when people think about evolution. But you're right that we can tell now. How old this ecosystem was. Old enough. It's young enough that good has evolved. It's good. Yeah. What else do we know?
Something might have died or be dying. Maybe it's something out of water.
Okay. So.
Or this could just be an old leaf that's low on the tree.
Or another indication of the season.
Right. So the three possible explanations for a leaf like that, right? The tree is dying. There's unusual turnover of leaves, or it could be seasonality. Right? How can you tell those apart?
Be a plant person.
So it could be that leaves that come from being deciduous look different than leaves that just sort of die from disease. Right? And ones that sort of die from disease often curl up. Ones that sort of fall off a tree sort of are flat. Maybe that's evidence. I don't know, because I'm not a plant person sufficiently. Right? But you can think about that. Another thing you might think about is whether there's layering when you have enough resolution to pick it up, which you want in most fossil plants, but maybe you have enough resolution to say, okay, look, here's a leaf pulse, there's no leaves and leaf pulse. Okay. What
So
else?
there's probably humans nearby, because there's a mixture between like small trees and pedestrian-friendly grasses.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm going to disagree.
Okay. Good. Why?
Because you can't support your claim that they're pedestrian grasses.
That was the wrong word to use. I'll get back to you on a better one.
Trample resistant.
Well, I've seen grasses like that next to creeks, so they could be. What's that zone next to a creek? Riparian zone. Could be a riparian type plant. So your ecosystem could have a large body of water.
Right. And also, either they are trample resistant, they probably didn't evolve to be trample resistant, or they might not have, and so they're wild trample resistant that you don't know. Just gonna try trampling them yet.
Just so happens to be.
Figure research program. I trample things and see if it's right. What else? Yeah.
We didn't get a leaf, but from the leaves that I can see that other people have, they look like the leaves of the deciduous trees. You would get climate range from what we know about.
Good.
Trees.
Another good point you point out is like you didn't get a leaf, right? So any fossil assemblage is a subset of what was there. And so, all you had was, everyone else was maybe one move. And so there are various statistical approaches you can do to say, how good a sample is my fossil data set. So one thing is called bootstrapping. We sort of pick things at random from what you have and make a new set. And say, okay, if I could make a new set of fossils from this set, sometimes I would have no wood, sometimes I would have many leaves, and I have no leaves, right? Give a sort of sense of how much uncertainty you have. Or you'd all find grasses. Okay, well, I'm pretty sure grasses there have good evidence for grasses because in all my samples, right? But there could be something else also at low frequency that because I know I have such a small sample size, I could have missed. Yeah, that's good. Anything else? This is great. You did really well. I've done this in the past years, and they haven't done quite as well. Hope they don't watch YouTube. All right. So today we're doing evidence. So there are various kinds of evidence for the stories we've been telling so far. Right? And so you should now have a sort of sense from your investigation of how you can make inferences and how you can make things that are sort of supported but not completely certain. Or things like there is wood here is more certain. Okay. And so some ideas are molecular fossils, trace fossils, body fossils, phylogenetics, from extant organisms and from experiments. Okay. So here's one example. So here's looking at carbon chains of different length. Okay. And you can look at these and say, yep, this sort of distribution of carbon chains is consistent with life. Right? You don't see this sort of distribution of length if it's just made from random chemical reactions. There you might see more of a hollow curve, right? Or lots of small things, and only a few things get larger. There's a sort of, unimodal curve that's more from life. Okay. And here we have more evidence, looking at things in shales. Okay. And so you can see sort of what things we're eating based on things like the carbon-13 ratio. Okay, carbon-13 versus carbon-12 versus carbon-14. Okay, and so these were chemoautotrophically. So they weren't photosynthetic, they were using chemicals for energy. Okay, and you can get that just from looking at the molecules. Okay, not looking at, what their mouths look like, if these have mouths, or not looking at cellular structures at all, just looking at these molecules preserved in the rocks. Okay. Here's another example. So you can use that sort of information and look at things like temperature through time. Right, and here we see, we are a little past here. Okay, and we're sort of zooming out each step. Right, so you can see, 70, present to 1100, present to 18,000 years ago, and so forth. And so you can get information from this from looking at things like oxygen isotopes in preserved rocks and that sort of thing. Okay, so it gives an estimate of age. And so things like ice cores give you some things for here, doesn't give you anything for back here. Right, so you use other evidence. And one nice thing is you can then compare evidence and say, okay, ice cores say that at this point we had a warm period, right? But what do tree rings show? What do isotopes show? And what you should find is that things agree, and oftentimes you do. So it's climate, things do agree. Okay. But it's another way of doing science. So if someone said, okay, well, the ice cores say this, but these tree rings say something else, then it's just going to figure out why that is. Like, oh, maybe there was a drought, and that made the tree rings more closely spaced too. Something like that. That sort of tension is how science gets done. Okay, trace fossils. So, what's this?
Trace fossil.
Good, yes. Trace of what? Yeah, I can't tell either. But I read the paper. This part is a worm burrow. Okay, worm going down. And this is a trilobite burrow. Okay. And what they think has happened, so, have you people familiar with trilobites yet? We showed them earlier. They look sort of like pill bugs. They're not related to pill bugs, but they have that sort of shape. Okay, with carapace, the segments, many legs underneath. Okay, and what I think happened was there's a worm burrowing down, and this trilobite I use this. Here's a worm burrow. The trilobite sort of went down and was trying to get the worm and like feeling with his legs to go down the burrow and like grab the worm. Okay, so there's evidence that trilobites ate worms. Okay, from this sort of preserved hunting behavior. Okay, so we don't have the trilobite, we don't have the worm, but we can still figure out something about their behavior, you know, tens of millions of years later, hundreds of millions of years later, from fossils like this, which is kind of cool. Okay, dinosaur trackways, very famous, right? And so we can tell something about dinosaurs moved in herds. So if dinosaurs moved in herds, you should see a lot of parallel tracks. If they didn't, we should see solitary tracks. Okay? And so you can see, lots of parallel tracks, and also we see things like the smaller tracks would be in the middle. Okay? So like other herd animals now, the young are sort of protected by having adults on the outside. So it shows there must have been predation too, to have, a need to have the young on the inside. Okay? So you know something that like, oh yeah, so juvenile sauropods were vulnerable to predation from looking at the tracks. Okay. Here is insect damage on leaves. Okay, you can see things tunneling through leaves, leaf borers. This, things sort of chewing leaves, right? And we can look to see, we know there's climate change, things are getting warmer. Well, things have gotten warmer in the past too. What happens? And so you can look at, when temperature went up and CO2 went up, what happened to leaf damage, right? And they say, oh, in this case, there was increased damage on leaves by insects. And so it suggests that the same thing happens now. We should see an increase in damage on leaves. Of course, there are new factors acting, like pesticides, but there's insects, and you have a big monoculture, so things are a little different. So there's information about what you can expect. Okay, and also what's happened in the past. So you might think that, okay, at this point, there's much more insect damage, then that'd be exert even more selective pressure on plants to evolve anti-insect defenses. So maybe we see a burst of things evolving latex canals, evolving nasty chemicals like caffeine. Right? So that's something you can test for, and then get other evidence and make hypotheses and keep testing. Okay, make sense? Okay. Here we see information about, when things start eating grasses. And the way we can do it is from fossil poop, right? Remember, grass has a little bit of silica inside, a little bits of glass almost, okay, like this. And so if we look at dinosaur poop, look inside, you can see, oh, is there much silica? One early idea for extinction of dinosaurs was grasses came, dinosaurs couldn't eat grasses, and so dinosaurs went extinct. Right? Not true, but we can tell that by looking inside coprolite and say, yep, that's a dinosaur coprolite. Yep, it has grasses. Yep, dinosaurs are eating grasses. Okay? You can see which groups were eating grasses and what grasses they were eating. And now we can also have like body fossils, right? So trace fossils, think like actual little fossils of organisms, little things you see in museums. You should think of as fossils, right? So here we see, okay, so what's this ant doing?
I don't know, is he eating something on the plant?
Yep, it is.
And maybe pollinating plants.
That's a good hypothesis, but no. So these are known as extrafloral nectaries. So extrafloral, outside the flower. So some plants actually produce nectar outside of flowers. Okay? They do it invisibly at the bottom of this leaf. Okay? And what happens is the ants go and collect the sugar water. Okay? And in return, they protect the plant. Okay? And it's after for them because if lots of herbivores are eating the plant would be able to produce less sugar water. Right?
How is it protecting the plant?
If a ladybug lands, if an aphid lands on the plant, it might eat the aphid or take the aphid away. If a beetle larva lands on the plant, they'll throw it off. There are actually some ants that are very vicious, and then you feel like an herbivore, like a cow, brushes against a plant, ants will leap on it and start stinging. And actually, some of these commensalisms are so intense that the ants will actually kill any plant growing near their host plant. So you'll see this like clearing of like the plant, and this clearing, and anything, a branch that comes touches the plant, the ants chop it off. Sealing, the ants kill it. It's really amazing. And we can figure out how when this started to evolve by looking and finding these extrafoil nectaries in fossils. So again, this evidence of this fossil this behavior long ago from fossil data. We can even get this information about internal structures sometimes in fossils. So here are some really, really good fossils of extinct bilaterium. And so you can sort of see some information about the structure of their gut. Okay. And really high resolution of that. A lot of the Burgess Shale fossils, where we get the information about the Cambrian explosion, are really, really good fossils like this that preserve a lot of soft tissue, which is rare. Okay. You can see information. So here's for open shot. How we know that snakes ate dinosaurs? Well, we have information about, we have a fossil of a nest with one broken shell and a large snake that could easily eat a dinosaur and a dinosaur there. So we think that the snake was in the nest eating the eggs, and then something caused a dust storm or something happened that killed them all. Now, is that the only thing that could have happened? Well, no. This famous case is a dinosaur called Oviraptor. An egg raptor thief. And so it was thought that it was an egg thief. And that's a scientific name. Because it was found on a bunch of eggs on a nest. Actually, it was its eggs. So actually, it was taking care of its eggs and then died during a sandstorm or dust storm. But its name was Oviraptor because people thought it was actually eating the eggs. Okay? And so you could also think about what else could be happening here. So it seems pretty likely that this is predation of sauropods by snakes, but who knows? Maybe the snake was protecting the sauropods in return for some benefit that the sauropod gave it. It just happened to be in the area, right? So it's a good thing at alternate explanations. Okay. So not only can you tell what things are doing, you also tell how they worked. Right? So here is a stress analysis of a T-Rex skull. And so you can see, if it were biting, how much force could it put on before breaking? Okay, because we see, nowadays some animals like hyenas can bite through bone and you get the marrow inside. Animals can't. So hyenas have this niche that other things can't access. Okay, T-Rex, was it a scavenger or was it a hunter? Well, if it was a hunter, it has to be able to grab onto a running hadrosaur that's thrashing, right, and not get its skull broken. Right, whereas a scavenger, all it has to do is go scare away the other scavengers and start eating. So how much stress could its head take? Could it take down a hadrosaur without breaking? Okay. Also look at things like, score marks on the teeth. What was it eating? Was it biting into bone, that sort of thing. We also find evidence, information about like a hadrosaur, a tail vertebrae, I think. It has a bit of teeth from a T-Rex in it. Right, so we say, okay, well, they were definitely biting the bone. If the bone was, healed somewhat around it, you can say, oh, well, it bit the hadrosaur while the hadrosaur was still alive. Right? It's like CSI Cretaceous. Right? What's happening back then? Phylogenetics tells you a lot, too. So here it's not fossils, it's based on extant stuff. You can still figure out what's happening long ago, or not too long ago. So here was phylogeny of bird flu, right? So bird flu spread and started killing many birds, and worried it would hop into humans and start killing humans. Okay? And so they can figure out, first of all, where it came from by plotting areas on this and figuring out what the area near the root of the tree is. Okay. Well, also you can see what made it most infectious, right? So viruses are always evolving because they actually being copied poorly. So always changes happening. What changes led to them becoming really widespread? So you can go back and figure out, once this site changed, then it became airborne infectious. Okay. different songs, right? And the idea is that, you sing to attract a mate, right? You only want to attract a mate of a species that you're compatible with, right? Why waste time courting and fertilizing and all that, and then get no offspring? Things that do that end up leaving no offspring, and that trait goes away. And so you could think, well, maybe when these birds evolved, they evolved to sound different than their relatives who are in the same area, right? If that's so, then maybe they both can mate with a hypothetical ancestor, but they've sort of grown far apart. And so what these scientists did was, you can measure this, what they sound like now, and then they inferred from this what the ancestors sounded like. Okay? Using an algorithm, which we're not going to get into, you can sort of see it looks sort of like a mixture of the two descendants. It's not quite that; it's a little more complex than that. That's what they don't feel, right? Well, now they can reconstruct this. They can then play that, so they can synthesize an extinct frog call, and then see if modern frogs will mate with them. So here we see that. Okay. But they have a female there, and then two. Just mute the lights for a sec. And then two speakers. And then you can see which way the female wants to go. That's a. So they can see which way the female wants to go. And so they can test the response of females to different males to different synthesized calls. Okay. And you can see, here's the species. And so black goes towards one species, red goes to the other species. So against its sister species, the most closely related species to it on the planet, it doesn't try to mate with them at all, right? But it will try to mate with its ancestor. And even species that get further related from, like this one over here, or this one all the way over here, right? So they're not picky between this and this as much as they are between this and this, because these share a lot more history. There's evidence that they displaced each other in terms of characters and evolved to sound different from each other in a way that made them not mate with each other. Right? So you figure out the evolution of song, through time using a phylogeny. Another thing you can do is try to explain large patterns, right? So the tropics are much more diverse than the temperate regions, which are more diverse than the high latitudes, right? The Arctic or Antarctic. Why is that? Well, there are various ideas about this. One idea is that speciation rates are higher in the tropics, right? So you keep producing more species. Okay? Another idea is that extinction is lower in the tropics. So you produce the same number of species, but they just go extinct more slowly. Okay, both of those would create that pattern. So here's analysis on birds, estimating speciation rate and extinction rate is the function of latitude, right? And so if the speciation idea made more sense, then we should see higher speciation rates in the tropics and lower in the temperate. We don't see that. If extinction were true, we should see lower in the tropics and higher in the temperate. We do see that. Okay. But if we look at the net change, right? So speciation minus extinction rates, it's about constant across latitude. Right? So it doesn't seem that speciation and extinction explain it. What is interesting is that turnover is much higher in the temperate region. So you're producing species faster, but they're going extinct faster. Okay? And so we don't necessarily do that pattern, but that's another testable thing we can investigate. Okay? Information from modern species can give you information about evolution too. Okay? So here we see a thing of sticklebacks. These are once one species, and now lynx there are two species. There is one that lives near the bottom, lives up in the bottom, and one that swims around the top. Okay, both differ from their ocean-dwelling relatives because they have much less armor. Okay, and ones that live near the top of the water actually, so you know how whales can use baleen to filter feed. Whale sharks use their gills to filter feed. Right? The aquarium has one. You can see. And these fish have evolved more and more gill rakers, so they can filter feed better too. It's adaptation. And so the question's about, well, why are there two of these species? Why aren't they interbreeding? How did that happen? So the various ideas for why that happened. And the original idea used to be that one species got in, and then those that were only living on the top of the water did well, those that were living on the bottom did well, and so there was selection for two different forms. Okay. And then later evidence showed that what happened actually was fish went in once and evolved one form, and then later invasion of the same parent species, but the ones living in lakes already evolved to become living near the top. So then they evolved to the other form. Okay, that's information from excellent data. Another thing you can do is just do direct experimentation. Okay, so we'll get to this in a little while, but there's this, evolution itself is fact. It's known. That's not controversial. Within evolution, though, people are always fighting about how evolution happens. Right? So does evolution happen by group selection or by individual selection? Right? So, old documentaries talk about doing things for the good of the species. Right? Like, they're not reproducing for the good of the species. Well, why would anything do that? That's stupid. Right? I will not have babies. You have the babies. That species needs you to have them. That trait's not going to survive. Right? It's just dumb. But then how do we have things that look like altruism? Right? How do we have things that don't reproduce certain times? Why is that? And so there's some ideas of group selection, such that, okay, if I'm in my little group, if my group, we all help each other, then we all have more offspring. Right? Where another group, they don't help each other, they'll have fewer offspring. Maybe that entire group will go extinct. So even though it costs me something to, share my food with you, and you share your food with me, in the long run we're better off. Right? Even if it does in the short term look like I'm giving up some resources to you, which would be against individual selection. Right? So we can actually do experiments and see, here we have a bunch of these tribolian beetles, and we can do experiments where we have different amounts of selection. So it's like for big beetles or little beetles or all beetles, or just at random, and then have different, vial sizes and things like that, and then we can actually run evolutionary experiments and see how the species change, and how quickly things change, whether they can evolve certain behaviors. Okay, do they evolve the ability to help each other? Okay, so it's another way to get evidence for evolution. If you have an idea, you can go and actually test it. Okay? So are there questions about any of this? So two big things I want you to pick up from this are, all the different ways we get evidence for evolutionary theories, but also sort of a feeling for how in science we're always trying to fight with each other and overturn each other's theories using more evidence or different evidence or different interpretations. It's a very dynamic process. And of course, what we think we're doing is getting closer and closer to the truth, right, through time. That seems to be the case. Good. All right, anything else?
I actually did a project on weird altruism last year.
Mm-hmm.
And there's actually a species of lizard that has 3 different colors, and it's similar to rock, paper, scissors in that there's a bully, a thief, and an altruist. And they there's kind of a sign type distribution of the population sizes. As the bullies get more populous, so do the altruists. But as the thieves rise, the thieves and the bullies both the altruists and the bullies both drop off.
Yeah.
But it all maintains the equilibrium.
Yep. It's all sort of game theory. If you've ever seen A Beautiful Mind, that movie, it's all based on that sort of idea. And that's a big trend in evolution now, thinking about game theory and why things are doing the way things they do. And you get things like these dynamic equilibria, which is cool. Yeah.
When I went to work with wolves, I'd always just assumed that wolves functioned in packs to help hunt, and it actually turns out that wolves function in packs primarily for the helping rearing cubs, because everyone rears the cubs, and then they use the pack as their hunting mechanism as well, and then it's sort of, I learned that lions are the same way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cool. Your hand was up.
Sorry.
It's fun to see, how, these old ideas about, why there are wolf packs and things can be overturned with more evidence, right? Good. Excellent. See you on Friday.